The story opens with a woman named Ebony who has just relocated to a new house alongside her mother and 3 kids. This move follows a severe dispute with her husband, forcing her to raise the children as a single parent. Ebony's mother is currently battling cancer, yet she firmly believes divine intervention keeps her alive. Her deep religious devotion drives her to visit the church daily for prayer. Ebony, however, rejects religion entirely, a sentiment shared by her 2 sons, which keeps them all away from the Sunday service. Only her young daughter accompanies the grandmother to church. Ever since the marital separation, Ebony's mental state has rapidly deteriorated. This distress leads her to abuse alcohol and enforce rigid rules on the kids. Her extreme financial stinginess alienates the children, and her relationship with her mother is equally strained. One evening during dinner, Ebony's youngest son, Andrew, asks for a glass of milk, but Ebony refuses, claiming the doctor advised limiting his intake due to a severe milk allergy. Andrew quickly counters, accusing her of lying just to save money since no doctor ever issued that warning. Infuriated by his defiance, Ebony strikes him across the face, causing his mouth to bleed. She immediately cleans the wound, offering a regretful apology for hitting too hard. Later that night, Ebony's daughter calls her father to complain about the situation, revealing that their mother's toxic behavior persists, her drinking has resumed, and she has turned physically abusive. Mid-call, a foul odor suddenly fills the air. Meanwhile, Ebony is working when a persistent fly begins buzzing around her. She soon notices a swarm of flies invading the space, tracking their origin directly to the basement. Cracking the door open, she is hit by a repulsive stench. Using a cloth, she drives the insects back downstairs, locks the door, and retires for the evening. By 3 a.m., Andrew wakes up craving a snack. He grabs the milk carton from the refrigerator, but a violent thud against the window pane startles him. Stepping outside to investigate the source of the noise, Andrew discovers a dead crow on the ground, having crashed into the glass. The following afternoon, the 3 siblings encounter a group of bullies on their walk home from school. The local boys target the eldest brother, hurling insults and eventually throwing a rock that cuts his head. Despite the injury, the siblings choose not to retaliate and walk away. Once inside, Ebony discovers a hidden bottle of liquor inside her oldest son's bedroom wardrobe. The moment he walks in, she demands to know why he possesses alcohol and when his drinking habits started. The boy defends himself, explaining he only hid the bottle to prevent her from drinking it. Ebony then notices the wound on her daughter's brother and asks what happened. Upon learning a neighborhood bully assaulted him, an enraged Ebony storms out to the street. She confronts the aggressive boy, physically attacking him as a warning to never touch her children again. Later, while relaxing at home, the swarm of flies returns to plague her, once again emerging from the cellar. She then spots Andrew whispering into empty space. When she questions who he is addressing, he claims to be talking to a companion named Trey. Though disturbed by this bizarre behavior, Ebony assumes it is merely an imaginary friend and dismisses it. That night, Andrew sneaks down to the cellar and Ebony is awoken by more unsettling sounds echoing through the house. Investigating the noise, she finds the basement door unlatched, assuming Andrew forgot to secure it. She locks it up tight and returns to bed. The next day, the grandmother visits the clinic for a medical checkup, only to discover her insurance policy will not cover the treatment costs. Instead, she learns Ebony has been secretly funding the medical bills out of her own pocket. This revelation explains her daughter's strict financial hoarding. Later that evening, Ebony's son catches her, heavily intoxicated once again, leaving him deeply disappointed. When Ebony enters the room, her mother confronts her, expressing her profound gratitude after discovering who is actually financing her cancer treatments. Ebony brushes off the praise, stating she is simply fulfilling her parental obligations. She then goes to bed, only to suffer a terrifying nightmare about an intruder breaching her bedroom. Jarred awake by the fright, she opens her eyes just in time to see her bedroom door slam shut with incredible force, indicating someone has just fled the area. Convinced a burglar is roaming the property, she grabs a baseball bat to inspect the lower floor, but the house appears deserted. Her attention is drawn back to the basement door, which stands wide open, emitting a stench far worse than before. Overcome by nausea, Ebony begins to gag, just as her eldest son approaches from behind to demand why she stole his hidden cash when she searched his wardrobe. Ebony replies, "Start by explaining where you got all this cash," Ebony demands. He reveals that his father has been sending it secretly. He's been saving up to move out because he can no longer stand living with her. When he asks for the money back, Ebony loses her temper and strikes him. Enraged, the boy shoves her back, causing her to fall. The impact seems to snap something inside her. She rises to attack him again, but little Andrew rushes in to defend his brother, only to trip and tumble to the floor. Her eldest son sneers at her, sarcastically mocking her stellar parenting skills and suggesting she deserves a trophy for being such a failure. He storms off in a huff. Later, Ebony returns the money and begs him not to leave, promising to change her ways and lead a life filled with affection. Driven to a breaking point by the flies and the stench, she finally calls in a pest control team the next morning. The workers inspect the basement and discover a rotting cat carcass, but they demand a steep fee to dispose of it. Ebony can't afford it and refuses, but her son steps in and pays the worker himself. The following day, a social worker arrives to evaluate the children's living conditions. It turns out Ebony's daughter reached out to her father, who then filed for sole custody, claiming Ebony is an unfit mother. The father argues that the kids are unsafe due to her drinking and physical abuse. During the visit, the social worker spots bruises on the son's arm and an injury on Andrew. When questioned, the children stay silent and dodge the topic, but the official senses they are hiding the truth about Ebony's violence. She issues a stern warning before departing. Outside, they notice a mysterious woman watching the house but assume she's just part of the social services team. The next day is the daughter's birthday, and Ebony throws a party, surprising her with the expensive smartphone she's wanted for months. The girl is thrilled and embraces her mother. However, during the celebration, Ebony hears a heavy thudding from the cellar. She finds Andrew there, looking vacant and repeatedly slamming his head against the door. Shocked by his disturbing behavior and his presence in the basement, she questions him, reminding him that she just tucked him in upstairs. Andrew replies that he was visiting Trey, a friend who supposedly lives in a hole in the basement. Ebony is unsettled, and realizing the boy is burning up with a fever, she carries him back to bed. Once the guests leave, she finds Andrew downstairs once again. This is his third time wandering off, and being exhausted herself, she simply orders him back to his room before heading to sleep. At the stroke of midnight, violent pounding echoes throughout the entire house. This time, no one can ignore the racket. Ebony screams at the kids to be quiet and go to sleep, but when the noise persists, she storms into their room to intervene. Suddenly, the house is filled with the sound of children shrieking in terror. Ebony's mother rushes in to find the kids huddled against the wall in fear, while Ebony sits before them in a trance-like disturbing state. The grandmother is horrified by the sight and asks what happened. The children cry out that their mother was physically throwing them against the walls. Ebony breaks down, sobbing that she didn't do it. The situation escalates the next day at school when all three children exhibit bizarre behavior. Andrew has a public accident in class and begins eating his own waste. When the teacher tries to stop this repulsive act, he hurls it at her in a fit of rage. Simultaneously, his sister tells her teacher she is bleeding internally, appearing to have a medical crisis. During a lecture, the eldest son breaks out into uncontrollable, haunting laughter. Even when the teacher tries to calm him, he sinks to the floor, laughing hysterically as if possessed. Following these incidents, the siblings are rushed to the hospital for evaluation. During a cognitive test, Andrew is shown a photo of a crow, which he immediately identifies as Trey. After running various tests, the doctor informs Ebony that the results are normal and the children are physically fine. Ebony is incredulous and begins shouting at the physician, arguing that his behavior in class was clearly a sign of a medical emergency and demanding a retest. The doctor loses patience and turns the tables, asking Ebony to explain the various bruises and marks found on the children's bodies. Ebony remains silent, unable to provide an answer. Ebony offers no reply and quietly exits. Her mother catches up, telling her she was wrong to fight with the doctor. She explains that while the medical tests are clean, the cause is far more sinister. She believes the children are targets of something paranormal, convinced an evil presence has invaded their home. Upon returning, the grandmother hangs a crucifix on the wall. Ebony mocks the gesture, insisting these are just superstitions and that no such things exist. Later, while Ebony prepares Andrew's bath, she discovers her oldest son pinning the boy down, trying to drown him in the tub. Ebony rushes forward to break them apart, but the boy's grip is unnaturally strong. Using all her might, she finally yanks her eldest son away, saving Andrew just in time. Their grandmother arrives as the older boy breaks down in her arms, sobbing that he didn't know why he did it. It felt as though he was being controlled by an outside force. Terrified by these events, Ebony keeps the kids home from school. Word reaches the social worker, who returns the next day to check on them. Ebony blocks her entrance, desperately trying to describe the bizarre incidents occurring inside. This time, the grandmother loses her patience and brandishes a baseball bat, physically forcing the social worker off the property. Outside, they spot the same mysterious woman from before, still snapping photos of the family. The grandmother screams insults at the stranger until she leaves. Seeking a solution, the grandmother later visits her church elders for help. She tells them their home is possessed by a demon, but the church officials decline to get involved, advising her to seek help elsewhere. Meanwhile, the unknown woman approaches Ebony. Though Ebony assumes she is with social services, the woman reveals she is actually a priest who knows exactly what Ebony is going through. She claims the house is haunted and that she was sent by a higher power to intervene. Showing Ebony an old photograph, she explains that a family lived there 2 decades ago and suffered the exact same ordeal Andrew is facing now. Back then, that family had tried every medical and psychological treatment available, but nothing could stop the boy's rapid decline. Ebony asks if she performed an exorcism to save the child by summoning the spirit out. The woman clarifies that she is a priest, not an exorcist, and had instead attempted a deliverance. She explains that, unlike an exorcism, deliverance doesn't require inviting the spirit into the light. Instead, it involves using holy relics or blessed water to repel the darkness from the person it has latched onto, much like what is currently happening to Andrew. The priest confesses that her attempt at deliverance failed years ago, and she couldn't save the boy. He perished. But the horror didn't end there. Shortly after his death, the mother completely lost her mind. In the middle of the night, she murdered her husband in his sleep with an axe, killed her own daughter, and finally committed suicide. When Ebony asks for the dead boy's name, the priest reveals it was Trey. Ebony is stunned, remembering that Andrew's imaginary friend uses that exact name. The priest warns that Trey isn't a friend, but a deceptive demon who takes a child's form to gain their trust before claiming their soul. Ebony, who has no faith in God, finds this impossible to swallow. She snaps at the woman, refusing to believe in the devil or any of her stories. She dismisses the woman's words as nonsense and storms off after a heated argument. As she leaves, the priest forces a piece of paper with her address into Ebony's hand, warning her that she will eventually come seeking help. Back at the house, the grandmother hears a deep, demonic voice calling her name. Terrified, she reaches for her Bible, but before she can open it, the spirits in the house launch a violent attack and kill her. When Ebony arrives home, she finds the crucifix on the wall engulfed in flames, filling the rooms with thick smoke. While trying to put out the fire, she discovers her mother's lifeless body. Overcome with grief and fear, she begins to wail. Andrew suddenly appears on the stairs, and from the floor above, the screams of the other 2 children ring out. Panicked, Ebony grabs the kids and tries to flee the house. During the escape, Andrew's demeanor shifts coldly. He looks at Ebony and tells her she is the one who killed her mother. And instantly his pupils turn pitch black. Terrified by the sight, Ebony loses her focus on the road. She fails to see an oncoming truck, but she manages to swerve just before impact, regaining control of the vehicle. She pulls over at a nearby motel to seek assistance. Sobbing, she warns the staff that her children are in mortal danger, but when they go to check, everything appears perfectly normal, and the kids are sitting quietly. This leaves the bystanders furious at Ebony, and they immediately dismiss her as insane. Afterward, Ebony is forced to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. The physician questions her about her substance abuse, and though she denies drinking, the doctor uncovers the truth through a positive blood alcohol test. Consequently, Ebony loses legal custody of her kids, who are placed under the care of a church. She can only watch in tearful despair as her children are driven away. Devastated and out of options, she turns to the priest for guidance. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the social worker visits Andrew as his health rapidly declines. A nurse mentions that the boy is exhibiting bizarre behavior, uttering strange noises and recently speaking in an unknown tongue. Elsewhere, the priest explains to Ebony that a horde of entities has invaded her property, with a dominant demon taking possession of Andrew. Through him, the entity is manipulating her other two children, targeting vulnerable souls like hers. She vows to build Ebony's spiritual strength and instill faith in her. The priest offers encouragement and teaches her how to pray. Back at the clinic, when the social worker attempts to speak with Andrew, he responds in a guttural, demonic voice, denying his identity. When asked who he is, the entity demands she undo his medical restraints first. She refuses to comply, prompting the demon to unleash its full strength. Snapping the leather straps, the boy leaps from the mattress onto the floor and begins scaling the wall on all fours. Horrified by the spectacle, she rushes to inform the medical staff, but the doctor dismisses her claims. Disguised as a healthcare worker, Ebony sneaks into the facility and successfully smuggles Andrew out to where the priest is waiting in a getaway car. Prepared to perform a deliverance ritual, the duo brings the boy back to the original cursed residence. The priest warns Ebony that during the process, the entity will use deception to break their focus, even masquerading as her loved ones, so she must remain vigilant. The priest begins the ritual by splashing holy water onto Andrew, causing the entity to writhe in agony. Suddenly, the demon mimics the appearance of Ebony's late mother, hurling insults and mocking their efforts. The priest ignores the taunts and pushes forward with the prayers, but the entity abruptly breaks free, laughing maniacally. Simultaneously, back at the church shelter, the other two siblings experience terrifying symptoms as the daughter begins bleeding from her eyes and mouth. At that exact moment, her brother's hands distort into claw-like talons with elongated nails, which he uses to violently claw at his own chest. The priest orders Ebony to the upper floor while she confronts the entity alone, but the demon shifts back into Andrew's form and vanishes. Before the priest can react, the spirit grips her throat and hurls her violently against the brick wall. It brutalizes her relentlessly, dragging her by the hair and tossing her body through the air, repeatedly slamming her against the ground. After a short while, Ebony ventures downstairs to investigate. She discovers the priest battered and bleeding on the floor, while Andrew sits nearby laughing before vanishing into thin air. Ebony rushes to the dying woman, who is taking her final breaths. Admitting her failure, the priest hands Ebony the bottle of holy water, instructing her to complete the ritual herself just before passing away. Alone, Ebony begins hunting for Andrew, tracking him down into the dark basement, where he suddenly materializes directly in front of her. Without hesitation, Ebony douses him with the holy water, causing the entity to scream in pain. Enraged, the demon retaliates by dragging Ebony by her hair. It takes on her exact likeness, mocking her as it chokes her. Rather than killing her instantly, the entity tortures her to break her spirit, and once Ebony is entirely defenseless, it moves in for the final blow. Pinning her down, the demon crushes her throat with its foot, bringing her to the brink of death. In her fading consciousness, Ebony envisions her mother, who guides her toward divine faith. This vision restores her inner peace and brings a sudden rush of spiritual strength, expelling the fear within her. Empowered by her new belief in God, she confronts the entity once more. She performs the deliverance, causing the demon to ignite and burn away until only ashes remain. Instantly back at the church, her levitating daughter drops back onto the mattress, fully restored. Her son also snaps out of his self-harming trance. The malevolent entity retreats into the cellar fissure, returning to the depths of hell from which it came, restoring absolute peace. Fast forward 6 months later, Ebony has successfully regained legal custody of her family. The household is filled with joy as they leave the cursed property and the city behind. After reconciling with her husband, she and the kids travel to relocate to his home, ready to rebuild their lives as a unified, happy family. Ebony has achieved sobriety, completely giving up alcohol, and the family vows to remain together for good. The terrifying ordeal ends here on a peaceful note.